had a nice weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Court of Public Opinion. We're not too far away from going live from our studio, which I'll have the pleasure of telling you more about later in the week. But I was thinking the other day, we're coming up to the 100th anniversary of the first commercial radio station to ever broadcast in Australia. And that was Radio 5DN from Jack and Stella Hume's home on Green Hill Road. And the first voice on commercial radio in Australia was Stella. Well, I suppose on the ABC you hear a lot of women, but she was the first woman on commercial radio. And still, you don't hear a lot of women on commercial radio, which I think is a pity. But that's a whole other story. But when they first went to air, they went to air from the dining room table of their family home. And do you know what? We're not going to do it from Green Hill Road, but we'll be going to air with this new interactive live streaming podcast from our dining room table. And I can't tell you how we're looking forward to it. It'll be wonderful. But more to come. More to come. We're sort of doing shakedown stuff at the moment, because you don't want to go to air and find, there are faults and problems and things. The technology simply amazes me. But we'll be able to have guests and phone calls and jingles and music stabs. It'll be a whole radio station. Anyway, tell you about it later. July the 17th. Matthew Flinders, on this day, 1814, publishes A Voyage to Terra Australis, detailing his circumnavigation of Australia, first to name the continent Australia. He dies later that day. Golly, July the 17th. 1989, the first test flight of the US stealth bomber. 1989. That's a while ago, isn't it? They've been around a while. But being stealth bombers, you see, we wouldn't know, would we? Sorry. 2018. The oldest evidence of bread made from grain, wild grain, discovered by archaeologists in 14,000-year-old dig in the Black Desert of Jordan. Golly. Captain James Cook arrives in the New Hebrides in Vanuatu, 1774. I've got a very interesting little story to tell you in a while about the South Pacific Islands and the latest political developments. You'll never guess who's coming to dinner. Anyway, 1917. Royal proclamation by King George V changes the name of the British royal family from the German-based Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to good old-fashioned Windsor. But that happened at the very end, really, of the First World War. So maybe they were, what can I say, keeping their powder dry to see which way it was going to go. Well, there's nothing like having a foot in both camps. Come on. Lord Tennyson, son of the poet, is named to succeed Lord Hopetoun, first Governor-General of Australia, 1902. Catherine Graham, one of my favourite people in all the world, American newspaper publisher, took over the Washington Post when her husband killed himself, and she was left with small children, no real knowledge of business, no real knowledge of journalism. But there it was. You get handed this amazing masthead, and you can't, what can you do? You've got to make it work. And God, she did. 2001, I had the great pleasure of speaking to her a couple of times during the Watergate business, for which, of course, the Washington Post was very much involved, if I can put it that way. She led the paper right through the Watergate scandal, dies after a fall. She was 84 years old when she died, and that year was 2001 when she died. Camilla, British wife of King Charles III, Queen of the United Kingdom, born in London. Happy birthday, Your Majesty. 1947 she was born. Forbes magazine announced Bill Gates as the richest man in the world with a net worth of, so many zeros, $12.9 billion. The richest man in the world. 1995 was the year. Earl Stanley Gardner, American detective writer, Perry Mason, among other things, born in 1889. The Romanov family and several other retainers were executed by the Bolsheviks, a firing squad in the basement of their home. 1998, Russia buries Tsar Nicholas II and the family 80 years after they were executed. So where were they? Why weren't they buried, I wonder? 1998, Russia buries Tsar Nicholas II. There you go. Some of the things for which we remember this day. And if it's your birthday or wedding anniversary, I hope it'll be a great day. I'm sure it will be. Whole new week stretching out before us. May it contain all sorts of good things for you. Now, the South Pacific Islands. Yes, I saw this and I had to chuckle. The Solomon Islands have announced that China will take over the police and be responsible for the administration of law and order. Now, that is truly extraordinary. We, or more correctly, Penny Wong, has been running around the South Pacific handing out our money and any largesse that she could so that these people wouldn't cozy up to the Chinese Communist Party, which is clearly in an expansionist mood. Now these people, the islanders, seem to have what I would probably call, I don't know, negotiable virtue? No, negotiable loyalty. Negotiable loyalty. Highest bidder kind of stuff. Why would the Chinese want to take over law and order in the Solomons? Why would the Solomon Islanders allow that? The Chinese look like buying their way into a strategic position in our part of the world. Now, I urge Penny Wong to put away our checkbook, end the charm offensive, and station a large contingent of Australian soldiers in Papua New Guinea, because they will be next. And do you know, if you go up to the top end of Australia, York Peninsula, and you stand at the very tip of this country, you can see Papua New Guinea. I think it's 40 kilometres away. We're dealing with dangerous things here. Now, the regular measuring of confidence has occurred, consumer confidence in Australia. It shows that we have lost confidence significantly in most of our capital cities, most of the capital cities of Australia, which means, I guess, that we are not inclined to go out and buy as much stuff, or maybe even anything, which means that the strategy of the Reserve Bank is working. The medicine is working. And speaking of the Reserve Bank, I see all sorts of rumours swirling around about a short list of people to replace Philip Lowe, the current governor. You know, the Reserve Bank is supposed to be, and glories in being, independent. What they're really saying, that's shorthand for independent of government. They're not being told what to do. Well, I'm sorry if the government or the Treasurer or the Treasury work up a short list of people that they want to see in control of the Reserve Bank of Australia, the governor, that man or woman can't possibly be regarded as independent. The public perception would be that he or she is one of the boys. I can't see how you can avoid that. You know, we here in South Australia are famous for lots of different things. Well, it seems we're on the map for growing, cultivating onions. Onions, but not ordinary onions. These are onions that will not make you cry. No regrets. People have been working apparently on this for years. I didn't know that. Onions that don't make you cry at a supermarket near you, and they're South Australian. And they'll be all over the whole country, I would have imagined. If you haven't received your electricity bill yet, you're about to. I saw that the ABC is questioning the providers and their profit margins. But the point is, I'm sorry, it's not that. It's the government with their pursuit of renewables when we have an abundance of cheap, available electricity. We have an abundance of energy. We have swapped common sense for ideology. Australia, which produces something like 1.3% of global emissions, we should not be put through this pain. Symbolic? I don't know what the government would say it was, but they clearly can avoid the hard questions, because I won't say the media is in their pocket, but I think they must be in awe of the government, because they're not pushing to ask these straightforward questions, questions which would lead to government accountability. The government is pursuing its ideological dream and giving us the bill. It's that simple. Oh yes, on the same sort of subject, the Climate Club. I almost forgot. The Climate Club. We will join the Climate Club. Now, I can't believe this, because the media goes along with Albanese and the whole tribe as they tour the world and do their state visits and whatnot, and they're in a position to ask questions. I can't believe this. As it was announced on the ABC with a certain amount of glee, I expected somebody to ask, why? Why? Has anybody asked who is in this club, what it's there for, what it's meant to do, what they want to achieve? Anthony Albanese goes to Germany and, while hugging the Chancellor, decides to sign us up. Question: is it in the interests of Australia? What is in it for us? Do you think maybe you should, perhaps, Prime Minister, consult the people of Australia? I can tell you one thing, I don't know who is in the club, but I can tell you who isn't in the club. The big polluters. India isn't. China isn't. South Africa isn't. The Philippines, Indonesia. You see, Albo, your job is to look after us, not the world. I say again, what is in it for Australia to belong to this club? I will bet you that the people who are in this climate club utilise, mostly for their power requirements, nuclear energy, which of course is exactly what we should be doing with our abundant uranium resources. We're nuts not to. Probably the worst... Pete, what would you imagine was the worst job in the world?
For me, working at abattoirs.
Oh, in an abattoir, yeah.
I'm curious though. What do you say?
Well, there are people who are paid to go through the effluent, checking the various communities for their use or abuse of various substances. Now, they have done their regular rounds of Australia, I read, And it seems that since they legalized the use of cannabis in the ACT, it has become the cannabis marijuana capital of the country. Surprise, surprise. Who would have imagined that would be the consequence? I think that was the design, in fact. Darwin is the biggest consumer of alcohol in the country. I don't know what that tells us. I think perhaps the moment you legalize something, you kind of tend to make it more popular, if not irresistible. I don't know. I was listening to Jeff Kennett the other day. Jeff Kennett, very good fella. The sort of person that the Libs need. You remember he was the Liberal Premier of Victoria. No nonsense kind of character. He came out with this the other day. People who work from home and refuse to go back into the office should have their pay docked. See, I can't understand working for a company, because the moment you work for a company, there is a master-servant relationship. That's why I would never work for a radio station, or I did work for 5AA, but in most of my entire career, I was a contractor. They contracted me to do the job and then left me alone. But the moment you're an employee, you can't say, I'm not going to go back into the office, sir. I don't understand any of that. People who refuse to go back into the office should have their pay docked. Interesting thought. They're not paying to get into town. They're not perhaps spending as much on clothes, possibly parking fees, maybe even childcare, all the sort of logistical stuff involved in moving around a big city. So for people who choose not to go back into the office, there should be a penalty. Because quite frankly, if you don't do something, if you don't impose a penalty or produce an incentive to go into the city, into the office, the big city, with all its economic importance, it's going to be a thing of the past. And I'll just leave you with this quickly. The Greens, I don't know much about Tammy Franks, but I know the name, and I know she's part of the Greens party, harassing the Australian Army the other day for having a parade through the streets of Adelaide. I think it was the weekend before last. They were doing nothing more than celebrating the gallantry and the history of our armed forces. And the Greens were saying something like, things like this, the parade they mean, things like this make us look like North Korea. Well, I'm sorry, Tammy. If you and the Greens have your way, this will be North Korea. The great mystery is, I don't know what you want to try and destroy this country for. Maybe we'll get you on the Court of Public Opinion, and you can tell us. Be interesting. Thank you very much for viewing the Court of Public Opinion, and we'll see you tomorrow. I'm Jeremy Cordo. Peter Clayton and I will be back. Believe in yourself, and bye for now.